Everyone, welcome to Time with the Bible Live. I'm here with Brian Mainers, who's joining us. I'm glad to have you, Brian.
Good to be here.
So our goal in this program has been just to get to know Jesus better by looking at the different eyewitness accounts and the different events that happened in his life, in his ministry. And we're going to be looking at Matthew 14. We're going to be looking at one of my favorite miracles of Jesus. I think there's so much to kind of take from it and even to think about application in it. So we'll be talking about Jesus walking on the Sea of Galilee. So we're going to begin in Matthew 14:22. But before we do, I just want to think about kind of what's led up to this point. Brian, kind of give us a rundown of what's leading up to him walking on the water here.
Yeah, so just before we pick up with our reading in 22, we see earlier in the chapter that John the Baptizer has been beheaded, and Jesus' disciples bring him that news. And so we're told that immediately Jesus seeks to go to a deserted place, both for him and his disciples. But in the effort of doing that, they're, of course, by the Sea of Galilee. People around the cities and towns hear that Jesus is in the area, and so we're told a great multitude comes out. And Jesus, like so many times before, he sees the people, he has compassion on them. And so he goes about healing the sick and the lame. And ultimately, it leads to him performing another miracle, which we've talked about as well, which is feeding the 5,000. So it's kind of the lead up to this. So, Jesus wanted to kind of get away. It didn't work out. He ended up being surrounded by a multitude of people, kind of spending the day with them. And now it's come to the end of the day after he's fed the 5,000. So that's where we pick up here.
Yeah, you could imagine like his mindset. His cousin's been killed, and they're going to do the same thing to him that they did to his cousin. And he knows that. And I can imagine just trying to get away, trying to get a break from the multitudes and the crowds, and not really being able to do that. He still has compassion on the people no matter what. And like you said, that kind of leads into this. So let's read. I'll read 22 to 27. We'll talk about it. This is immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side. And while he sent the multitudes away, and when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on a mountain by himself to pray. And now when evening had come, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." So Jesus takes some time to go up on a mountain to talk to his Father. He is praying, and meanwhile he sends the apostles across the sea, but he kind of spends this time alone on a mountain to pray. But while he's on top of this mountain praying, what's going on with his disciples? What are they dealing with?
Right. So we see it's interesting, depending on the version you have. Some of them say that he constrained his disciples to get into the boat. My version says he made his disciples get into the boat. So he was kind of by force telling his disciples to get and go. And he was going to stay behind, as you mentioned, Curtis, and go up into the mountain and pray, which I assume is what he wanted to do when he found out about John in the first place.
Yeah.
Usually that's what he'd do in a desert place like that. We find out in John's account, actually in John chapter 6 and verse 15, that Jesus perceived the people were about to make him king by force. And so I think we see him dispersing the crowd, dispersing his disciples, kind of in a haste to keep that from happening.
Yeah.
And when you think about that and you think of all the things that have gone on leading up to this, it's probably a pretty intense time. And Jesus is just wanting to break things up and get away. So
Yeah, so he sends them ahead of him while he's up on this mountain. And I find it interesting. They say that probably from the mountaintop in which he was, he could look out over the sea and he could see what was going on. He knew what was happening with his apostles. And so this storm comes in and they're struggling. They're rowing. Some of the other accounts bring out kind of the strain of what's going on with them. And in fact, I think in Mark, it talks about how it's like the third watch of the night that he sees what's going on. And he waits till the fourth watch of the night. We're talking like a 3-hour span. It's not until the fourth watch of the night that he, it's kind of from one point to another is a straight line. So the best way that he took was to walk out onto the water towards them. I don't know about you, Brian. I don't know what I would think if I saw somebody walking on water out to the boat. But they, what do you think their mindset was when they saw that?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we got to remember, he's been with the 5,000 all day. He's fed them dinner. Now they've dispersed. It says that you're right. And John, I think it is, his account says in the fourth watch of the night, which looked that up, and that's about 3 a.m. is when he actually came to the disciples. So, but we're told from John's account that he had seen them and he saw the difficulty that they were having. So, Jesus knew what was going on. I suspect Jesus knew what was going to happen before he sent the disciples away. Yeah. But I think there's a lesson in that too. Jesus expects us to go and do his will, and it's not always going to be easy. Sometimes we're going to face headwinds and waves and storms in this life. And I think he's just, in a sense, I think he's preparing his disciples for facing difficult times and testing their faith. And, he doesn't immediately go and take care of things and smooth things out for them. He lets them deal with that difficult situation for a while. So, but yeah, seeing Jesus, there's storm, it's dark. And you see somebody walking on the water, and we're told that they cried out, and they said it's a ghost. They definitely were afraid of, what was going on. The storm was probably bad enough. And then seeing someone out there on the water just kind of, I could see how it'd freak you out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're fearful. They don't even know who this is, what this is. It says they cried out for fear. But what I like is Jesus's response to them. Because even though in the midst of the storm and the fear of what's coming towards them, Jesus says, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." There's several times where the apostles are fearful, they're afraid, and Jesus calms them. He doesn't want them to be afraid. He doesn't want them to be fearful. He wants to give them some comfort here. I don't know. I looked it up, but I think "it is I" is the same thing as "I am." And that's pretty powerful in the sense that, he's letting them know that he's in control here, and they have no reason to fear.
Right. Yeah. And they've been in a similar situation before, right? So previously Jesus was on the boat with them and they were in a storm and on the sea. Yeah. Of course, Jesus calmed that storm, but now they see Jesus and he's not in the boat with them, but he's out walking on the water. And how appropriate for him to say, "I am."
Yeah.
And how comforting is that, right? He's demonstrated before, and it's easy for us to forget God's power. But he's demonstrated before, and he's just calling his attention to it too. Again, I think, here I am walking on the water. Be reminded, I'm a commander of all of creation. So take comfort.
Yeah. Amen. All right, let's look at the next section. Brian, do you want to read 28 to 33?
Yeah. And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." And so Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, Truly, you are the Son of God.
So Peter realizes who he's dealing with. He realizes it's Jesus, and immediately asks, let me come out there with you. Let me walk on the water like you. I don't know. Have you ever thought about like what prompted Peter to say that? Peter says a lot of things just kind of off the cuff sometimes, but I think Peter struggles with that a bit, but I don't know if that's the way that I look at it here. I think he's just saying, he's to follow Jesus, and I don't know. I don't know if it's the fear of the other 11, that kept them on the boat, and Peter's bravery into trying to just follow Jesus, or what. I don't know. You can look at it that way, I suppose. But Peter asks to come out. He says, let me be out there with you. And so Jesus has come. And Peter gets out of the boat and he walks out to Jesus. So what do you think is on Peter's mind at that point? What do you think's going on with the apostles?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to point out, I think all the apostles, they've been sent across the sea by Jesus. And I think they took his command to go across very seriously. So even though they were making bad progress, they continued to struggle and try to do what Jesus had sent them to do. So I think we see, at least I think in that, we see the faith that the disciples had and their desire to please Jesus. And yeah, Peter, he sees this figure out on the water, and they all cry out, and Jesus announces himself. And I think Peter's reaction is just, he always wanted to be with Jesus. He always wanted to be near Jesus.
Yeah.
And so Peter, I think his response is, it's Jesus. I want to go and be with him. I want to be near him. I think it took a lot of courage for Peter to do what he did, to even offer to do that. You get the storm all around you that you've been fighting, got relative safety in the boat.
Yeah. And
yet Peter so much wants to be with Jesus that he asks Jesus to invite him to come to him. And it says a lot about Peter and his relationship with Jesus, and just his desire to be with him. What a great example for us.
Yeah, I think that I see courage in what he asked, because as afraid as they were, and as afraid as they were when they saw Jesus, it took courage to ask Jesus to call him to him.
No doubt.
And so he gets out of the boat. He does walk on the water, but he gets distracted. You can imagine walking on that water, what that would have been like. But the waves, the wind is boisterous, everything that's going on around you, and he's distracted and he begins to sink. I don't know. I think that's a pretty good metaphor for the things that I've struggled with before in my life. If I would just concentrate on Jesus, I would just focus on him, I wouldn't struggle so much. But I get worried. I get concerned about things. I see things that concern me.
Yeah. And I think the comfort that we get from this is, Peter had a great deal of faith, but faith doesn't mean that we have no fear. I think we see that first with the disciples and the situation they're in. And then I think we see that again with Peter as he gets out and walks on the water to Jesus. He has a great deal of faith, but he's got fears to overcome. And so, for us, I think it's a good message and reminder for us is that, when we're serving God and doing things for him, doesn't mean we're not going to have any fear, but it does mean that we need to put our faith and trust in him. And, when we do start to sink, we need to reach out for Jesus like Peter did as well.
Yeah. Amen. And that's exactly what he does. He begins to sink and he turns back to the Lord and he says, Lord, save me, which is exactly what Jesus does. He reaches out, catches him, and he says this phrase, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" What do you think he's talking about? How do you think?
I think he just sees a wavering in Peter's faith. Is Peter's faith strong? Yes. Is it strong enough to, cause him not to worry or be concerned about the things going on around him? Well, it's not that strong yet. And I don't know that our faith ever gets to the point where it's that strong. But I think Jesus is, encouraging him to continue to work to build and increase his faith. And we see Jesus, challenging Peter to that end more, right, as his time draws closer. So to me, it's just pointing out that, yes, Peter had good, strong faith, but it still wasn't all that it could be. And it wasn't all that Jesus needed it to be.
Yeah.
And again, what a lesson for us, right? So our faith, no matter where we're at, as far as our maturity as a Christian, we always can and need to grow more in our faith. Help us to be better prepared for when the storms and waves do surround us and come our way, and they will.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes experience to realize what are the winds and the waves compared to Jesus. What are our problems compared to the one who is compared to the one who created us? And that, I think that's pretty challenging. And that takes a while to develop that kind of trust. Really, the word of faith is trust.
Yeah, and it's one thing to notice, to recognize that on an intellectual level.
Yeah.
It's another when it comes to practicality of the situation. And you're right. I think we lose sight. Did Peter know that Jesus was creator of all things? Yeah, we see him admit that, right? He knows that, he acknowledges that. But sometimes in the heat of the moment, we forget. So
Yeah. I guess I've had moments in my life where everything around me, because I'm so focused on that, and I'm so focused on either the hurt or the fear or whatever it is, that it's easy to lose focus, and I kind of forget in the moment that I kind of forget about. I don't want to say I forget about Jesus, but I forget about what Jesus is able to do in my life, and how I'm able, like finding joy in trials. That's not natural.
yeah.
That's not a natural response.
Well, and I think we're so limited in our power. I think it's hard for us to remember that Jesus is, God's much more powerful than us. It's nothing for him, and it's insurmountable for us. And I think we take our eye of faith off of him, and we get distracted by the things going on around us, by the storm around us. So, yeah,
very much. So they got back into the boat, and the wind ceased. I think this is probably shown in Mark's account more than anything. Is that at the moment that they get into the boat, the winds and the waves stop. The difference between the chaos and the peace was the presence of Jesus. I think that's helpful to keep in mind.
Yeah. Jesus' presence was coming to them. His presence is coming to us. And yeah, in John's account too, and this just an interesting fact. In John chapter 6 and verse 21, it says when he got into the boat, immediately they were at their destination. So
I find that interesting. Like, he gets in the boat immediately. I don't know. I'm trying to picture that in my mind, but they're out in the middle of the sea, and he gets in, and immediately they're at the dock.
Yeah, it's about 10 miles across the sea, and they've been rowing for 3 to 4 miles. We're told, I think, in Mark's account. So they probably very truly are in the middle of the sea. when Jesus gets to them. But yeah, it's just amazing when you think about that and the awesome power of God. I can't even imagine how that happens, or what that must have felt like to the disciples, or what. But yeah, it's pretty neat. But I think you're exactly right. I think the lesson that we get from this in our lives is that if we will draw nearer to Jesus, his presence is going to be calming in our lives as well. So when we face the tempest all around us and the waves and all the things that Satan brings our way, if we'll draw near to him, we'll have a great peace.
Yeah. Someone said this shows so much how we can have peace with Jesus. Yeah, it's true. Peace and comfort and joy, those things that he has to offer us. I can't. There's a lot of passages I was thinking about Philippians and talking about the joy that he says to have despite the circumstances that Paul and others were in. I was thinking about the peace of Psalm 23, where even though David's life was very much the valley of the shadow of death, he found this peace and this joy in his life with the Lord. And same thing, I think that's true in our lives. That's what he has to offer us. But look at the last verse there. It says, and then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him and said, truly you are the Son of God. I mean, I don't know. You think about the things that he had done up to this point. You think about the feeding of the 5,000 and how even they just didn't get it. Like it didn't register with them. I don't know. Because later on they argue about whether they had bread or not. But this is really incredible, and I think they finally got it. Like it finally stuck with them. Wait a minute, there's something like you are not just a prophet, but you truly have to be the Son of God to have done what you've done.
Right. Yeah, and what a great point it is. So that look at what they had to go through to get to that. They had to endure the difficult times. Peter had to sink and lose faith for them all to get to this point where it finally seems to really hit them and really mean something to them that Jesus is the Son of God. And, so there's a lesson there for us, you mentioned earlier, rejoicing in our trials. And I think the reason we can do that is because those trials help to increase our faith. They help us to draw closer to Jesus. They help us to get to the point where we can really enjoy and experience that peace that Jesus has to offer in our lives. But just like the disciples, we've got to continue to seek him. We've got to continue to ask for his help if we're going to grow stronger. So yeah, still a lot of really good practical lessons for us in this scripture. And it's just, Amen. It's so neat to see the power and care that Jesus has for those who follow him throughout the whole story. So
yeah, very much so. Amen. Well, thank you guys for joining us. It's been a good study. Lots to take in Matthew 14, and just thinking about this event and walking on the water. So we're glad that you've joined. Hopefully you've learned something about Jesus and about his life, and about how that, I want to live my life for the one who can control the winds and the waves. And I want to live for the one who created this world. And hopefully you do too. You have any questions, comment down below. Let's hear your thoughts. Let's hear what's on your mind about this passage, and be happy to read those and respond to those. So Brian, thank you for being a part of the program. Glad you were able to join us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll have to have you on again. All right, everybody, have a good day, and God bless.